Hello, everybody. We're going to get started in just about 30 seconds here. All right, hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for being here. My name is Ben Zelikovitz. I am a co-founder of Get Quorum, and today I am doing double duty as both a host and a panelist for this webinar. I'm really excited for today's webinar as we have three industry rock stars joining us today. We're going to get to their introductions in just a second. But first, the focus of today's webinar is the modernization of association governance. After the introductions, we'll have an overview of the status of association governance, followed by a review of the digital ecosystem for governance. I think I'm most excited for that part. Then we'll go have some food for thought on Robert's Rules of Order. And lastly, an overview of how technology can improve and make governance meetings more efficient. We will essentially start at, Mark, and if you can go to the next slide, please. We'll essentially be starting at a high-level overview of governance in the association space, and think of it as zooming downwards from the high level into point-driven solutions that might be helpful to drive operational efficiency for your associations. Lastly, we'll have lots of time for QA, both throughout and at the end of the presentation. So at the bottom of your screen, there should be a Q&A button. Please do not be shy. Submit your comments, submit your questions while we're chatting. Maybe we'll get to it throughout the course of the presentation. Maybe we'll get to it towards the end, but we'll certainly do our very best to address all of the questions. I anticipate the content presentation to be roughly 20 minutes or so, and then Q&A throughout the end until we've had opportunity to satisfy everybody's questions. So having said that, as I mentioned, my name is Ben Zelikovitz. I am a co-founder of Get Quorum. We are an electronic voting and virtual governance meeting platform. We service associations of all shapes and sizes around North America. So I'm happy to be here both to host and share a little bit of how electronic voting and virtual meetings can benefit your association. However, I'm even more excited for you to meet our panelists. So we're going to go from left to right on the slide. So I'll hand it off to Noah. Noah, please say hello.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, very happy to be here. Great panel I have today for you guys. I'm the CEO of Minute Solutions, which is a professional third-party minute-taking company. We've been taking minutes at meetings for over 10 years and have completed over 50,000 sets of minutes for over 4,000 clients. We work with many different associations across Canada, into the US, some global as well. And just looking at the attendee list here, I do recognize some names, so it's nice to have some of our clients on the call today. Thank you guys for being here.
I'll go next. I'm Heather Terrence. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here as well. I am a certified association executive and a certified management consultant as well, who works with nonprofits all across Canada, from small community-based organizations to large national associations and everything in between. My background is in association management. I have 20 plus years serving in that sector, most recently as an executive director of a large national association. And I basically work with boards primarily and senior leaders in nonprofits to work through pain points and to help them sleep better at night. So that is, I started my business about 8 years ago, and I am very happy to be serving this community. Thank you for having me today.
Awesome, Heather. My name is Jeff Horn. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Wicket. And Wicket is a software platform that works exclusively in the association space. We provide a couple of core foundational software tools to associations. One is what we call a member data platform, and the other is a web and e-commerce platform. And we really viewed as leaders in helping associations break free from a lot of the traditional ways they thought about technology and software. And we work with real leaders in the space here in Canada, the Canadian Society of Association Executives. And in the United States, we're actually just rolling out our solutions for the American Society of Association Executives as well. So, yeah, we have lots of thoughts and opinions on the overall technology ecosystem for the sector. So really happy to be here.
Noah, Heather, Jeff, thank you. I'm super excited to have you all here. Heather is able to kind of tie everything that we might be covering from a technology perspective to the reality on the ground, and Jeff has an awesome perspective on the digital landscape. So without any further delay, Heather, maybe you can start us off.
Thank you, Ben. And I think what Ben was trying to mean is I probably have the least amount of content to start off. So I will be chiming in as my colleagues here work through their slides and present their content to you today. So what I'm seeing really in the association sector is that most associations struggle in general with technology. And I think the primary reason for that is because most associations in Canada are very small. They have only a handful of staff. And when you think of who that handful would be, it's probably the executive director, there's a finance and admin person, maybe a membership coordinator. There's usually not a dedicated IT person. And that's where you need that person to kind of pull everything together. And what I see with these smaller associations is that they either farm out that IT work to consultants or to other companies, multiples in some cases, or they do IT on the side of their desks. So they don't have an overall strategy when it comes to IT. And it's more in piecemeal, which is why a lot of smaller associations in particular struggle with technology. Databases, association management systems, whatever you want to call them, those are pain points for most associations that I speak with. Even when I was an executive as well, no one seems to be happy with their database, and particularly extracting data from it. It seems to be very difficult, particularly when it comes to governance and with leadership in organizations. They really rely on that data to make sound business decisions for the organization. And if they can't pull it from their database or they're not capturing it properly, that becomes a problem. Some of these next ones are pretty basic, but they're still very, very large pain points for many associations. They still rely on email to send board communications or committee communications, even within other volunteer roles. And for meeting packages for their board, they send a PDF or they send multiple Word documents or PDFs to their boards and their committees. Which is complicated. I know as a board member myself, if I have my personal email and my work email, it's actually easier to miss when it's sent to more places than one, believe it or not. And in many cases, it's not secure. If it's just sitting in your email, if you have a Gmail account or it's sitting on your desktop, confidential information and meeting packages are not being stored securely. There's also no central online hub for board members to find documents. This is probably one of the bigger pain points when it comes to boards, is that they have to scour through their emails, through multiple emails, through their desktop, through their laptop at home, just to find the information. So if I'm a board member and I'm doing some work and I want to access a board policy or a set of bylaws, sometimes it's not at my fingertips, and it would be lovely to be able to have one central place where I could have all the board minutes, the board packages, the policies, the bylaws, everything in a one-stop shop that's super secure, with an individual, username and password for each director to have, so that they can access all of the information in a one-stop shop that's extremely secure. There are portals like that exist, and we might get into that later on, but this is definitely a major pain point for many boards in the association landscape. Another thing I've found too as well is the AGMs. COVID forced many organizations, well, all pretty much for the first year, to do a virtual AGM. There are still a lot of organizations who've gone back to the in-person, and that's created a lot of problems with them too, not only from an inclusivity and accessibility lens, but also It's just they have trouble getting quorum. They struggle getting quorum. So it's actually more economical. It's proving to be more economical and successful for many reasons to hold those AGMs virtually. So you can see the trend where those associations that did go back to in person are slowly migrating back to COVID times whenever everything was done virtually. So those are kind of the main pain points that I'm seeing. So I'll turn it over to you, Ben, to go to the next speaker, and I'm happy to chime in for anywhere else that I can today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. Looking forward to hearing more as we progress. But Jeff, please tell us about the digital ecosystem.
Yeah, no, it's really it's good to hear Heather you speak about some of those pain points, because it's similar things that we hear every day when working with associations. I think one of the things that it's so common is to hear the frustration with the software tools that are available today and being used, and the most member-based organizations are not happy with their association management software or their ERP or their CRM or whatever they're using. And so we at Wicked, like we're pretty opinionated about technology and what modern technology looks like, and how it really should be used, and how the association sector should be thinking about technology. And really, our opinion is that traditional association management software, which most people are aware of, they're big modular systems full of a module for just about everything. The reality is that those modules tend to not really give you what you want, and or you end up in a big customized mess and unable to upgrade or move ahead. So we see all sorts of different things. And I think when you, as an organization, think about technology in 2025, I think one of the most important words to think about is flexibility. You really want to have flexibility. You want to be able to take advantage of new software as it evolves. You see something new, you want to be able to try it out. You want to be able to plug it into your ecosystem of tools and use it, especially with the rate at which technology is changing, here in this world we're in today. So when we look at this, and this is the work we do with leading organizations like ASAE, it's really about thinking about a digital ecosystem. That's the way you should be thinking as an organization, whether you have an AMS, a CRM, whatever it is, like you should be thinking in an ecosystem, because that really is the world we're living in. So when we look at an ecosystem, really we think about some core pillars of that at a high level, right? You need to have a system of record, a true system of record, source of truth, whatever you want to call it, that you can look at and say, I 100% can trust the data about my membership that is in this place, right? A lot of associations don't have that trust. They can't answer those easy questions, but it's such a pillar, right? So getting that right is really kind of the core foundation. And then from there, we really think about it as there's a whole world of great software out there. And a lot of that software is very approachable, right? It's not big and complex and crazy. Like a lot of these are tools you could go sign up and explore yourself. So just leveraging good best in class or best in need software to meet your needs, we really encourage folks to do. But the key to all of that is integration, right? And so it's become much easier to integrate software platforms together. It's still, it's still not perfect, but we've come a long ways in the last 10 years to how we can integrate and connect systems. So our opinion is that really you need a foundation, you need a really strong membership database. You need some way to deliver a member portal, e-commerce, these foundational tools. You need financial management software that's going to be able to allow you to run your finances. But then, go and use other great tools and integrate them in. And so I think specifically when we look at, board management or AGMs and things, there's lots of great software tools out there. And I think one of the challenges, going back to Heather's point, is that there's different price points as well, right? And so if you're a very small staff association, it can be challenging. Like there's tools like Onboard or Board Effect, Diligent, and these like full board management platforms, but they can be expensive, to simply put it. Not completely out of reach for many associations, but they can be expensive. There's one specifically that I'll just mention that's, here in Canada where we are, called BoardSpace, Ottawa-based company who have a much more affordable platform that's really specifically built for board management. And so that's a one that I recommend that folks look at, if they're a smaller group and operate on a smaller budget. But, whether it's Get Quorum, other tools like that, like there's a lot of really great tools out there, and we really encourage folks to explore it, use the right tools, and if nothing more, use your member portal, assuming you have one, as at least a starting point to be able to ideally be able to publish documents. And like Heather was talking about, get some kind of consolidated place where you can at least put documents and files and meeting notes and things, so you can start bringing it together, and getting away from sending emails and sending files that you're going to store in your desktop of your computer. Like when we talk about privacy and security, those are pretty weak links. So you definitely don't want to be, if you can avoid it, be relying just on email and sharing files that way. Somebody asked us, what was the board management tool that you like? The particular one here is called BoardSpace. BoardSpace. All one, I think it's maybe boardspace.co or boardspace.com. Recommend you check that one out for sure. And yeah, I think I'll stop there. I could talk for a long time about this, but I'll stop there, Ben, and we can circle back to any questions.
Maybe just before we move on, with your platform, what are the most common membership database, or what are the most common bolt-ons that your customers use?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I think we're in the business of providing what we kind of think of as a foundation, right? Which is that membership database that is really built to integrate with other tools and a web and e-commerce platform. And that kind of lays a foundation for which then we say, use other good software to meet your needs. And so there's different classes of software we see. Event management, like if you're running large events, maybe your AGM is tied into that event. So event management platforms, marketing automation platforms, learning management systems are very, very common. So those are kind of like the big buckets. Online community platforms. And online community platforms, there's really common ones like Higher Logic or Forge or different ones like that. And they can also be a repository for, documents and managing committees and working groups and things like that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different systems, depending on the type of association, whether it's a professional association, society, or trade association, for example, we may see different types of software being used.
Great, thank you. And so again, that the recommended vendor was BoardSpace. We'll put that in the chat for you. Okay, Noah, talked about General Robert. Is he a general? You tell us.
I will tell you. So, like Ben, some of you guys might be asking why, if we're talking about modernizing governance, why is there a picture of a U.S. Army officer from the 1800s on the screen? It would be a very good question to ask. Well, I think it's very important to start with our history, understand sort of where we came from and how we got to where we are today, and sort of go through the ropes a little bit. Henry Martin Robert, who you see on the screen, is most famous for his pocket manual of rules of order for deliberative assemblies. This was later known as Robert's Rules of Order, which many of you have likely heard of. Robert's collection of rules regarding parliamentary procedure was originally published in 1876. He wrote the manual in response to his poor performance leading a meeting. The meeting erupted into open conflict because of concerns about local defense, and Roberts was determined to learn as much as he could about parliamentary procedure and standardize the process as much as possible. Mark, next slide, if you don't mind. Though many may not realize, most modern board meetings operate under the principles of Robert's Rules of Order. His widely used principles provide a standardized framework for fair, structured, and efficient meetings. It was inspired by the U.S. House of Representatives and has become the most widely used parliamentary procedures guide for boards, committees, and organizations. Although Henry Martin died in 1923, as you saw on the last slide, there have been 12 editions of his book, with the latest version being released in 2020. Each edition has introduced updates and clarifications to adapt to modern meeting practices while maintaining the core principles of structured and democratic decision-making. As you can see here on the screen, the 5 key principles of Robert's Rules are majority rule, equal rights, one subject at a time, order and decorum, and clear record keeping. A typical meeting following Robert's Rules, it consists of the following, which I'm sure most of you are very familiar with this. Start the meeting with a call to order, next move into approval of minutes, then review and discuss reports, talk about unfinished business, bring up any new business, and then end each meeting with an adjournment. Next slide, Mark, if you don't mind. The principles and structures have stayed fairly consistent over the last 149 years. The latest version of Robert's Rules of Order, titled 12th edition of Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, introduces several updates to reflect modern meeting practices, including virtual meetings, electronic communication, and streamlined procedures. I'm going to outline, there's about the 6 that I have taken as the biggest takeaways, and compare them sort of to what they previously said and what the updates are. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is virtual and electronic meetings. Previous editions had limited or no guidance on conducting official meetings through electronic means. I mean, as you could imagine, this thing is like almost 150 years old. So I'm sure back then there was no such thing as electronic meetings. The 12th of the latest edition was updated to provide explicit rules for virtual and hybrid meetings, including how to establish rules of participation, voting, and maintaining order in digital settings. The next one is electronic voting and communication. In previous editions, voting procedures were primarily designed for in-person meetings with little consideration for remote or electronic voting. This one obviously ties in very well to get quorum. In the latest edition, the book talks about this very explicitly. It clarifies the legitimacy of electronic voting if permitted by an organization's bylaws and outlines best practices for securing and verifying votes. The next one I'll talk about is streamline handling of motions. Previous editions stated that some procedures require formal steps that could slow down decision-making. The latest edition simplifies the process of handling routine motions, allowing greater efficiency in association meetings. Next is clarification on executive sessions and confidentiality. In previous editions, executive sessions or closed meetings were covered but lacked detailed guidance on confidentiality breaches. In the latest edition, this strengthens rules regarding confidentiality violations and clarifies procedures for handling leaked or private discussions. Next one is expanded guidance on handling disruptions and disorder. The previous edition had basic rules for maintaining order, but were less specific. In the 12th edition, expands the framework for handling disruptions, including guidelines for repeated interruptions, ensuring decorum in both in-person and in virtual meetings as well. And lastly, improved accessibility and clarity. In previous editions, there were some complex parliamentary rules which were difficult for non-experts to navigate, which makes sense. And the latest edition has revised language for greater clarity, making rules more accessible for modern organization and new users. The key takeaways from all this and the 12th edition of Robert's Rules of Order reflects the realities of modern governance, adapting to technological advances, remote work, and the need for greater efficiency in decision-making. These updates help organizations run smoother, more inclusive, and better structured meetings, whether online or in person. And I guess I'll pass it back over to you, Ben.
Not before I ask you a question, though. We handle a lot of AGMs in the association space, and we still come across associations that use their secretaries to actually minutes. Is that a thing? Should they be moving towards third parties? And why would you want to move towards a third party for minute taking?
So it's always best to lean on the professionals, right? If your sports secretary was professionally trained in minute taking and she had the ability and the time at meetings to actually do the minutes and pay attention to the meeting and participate in the meeting, then it's a great reason to keep that in-house. But the fact of the matter is, majority of board secretaries are not professionally trained in professional minute taking. They have several other tasks that they need to do, and they need to be available for to communicate at board meetings. So we find a lot of our clients turn to us because their secretary or another member on the board is firstly not professionally trained, which leaves the board liable for things that could be discussed and put into the minutes at meetings. But on top of that, it is very hard for a board member to actively participate in a meeting and take the minutes at the same time.
What are, and Heather, feel free here. What are the implications of minutes that are not properly documented?
Yeah, it's a great question. Essentially, it's very liable, like the board would be liable for anything that does not belong in a set of minutes, or if minutes were handled in an incorrect way. One of my favorite sayings is, not only do my staff, we have about 150 professionally trained minutes who actually work on behalf of our clients, not only do they know what to include in a professional set of minutes, but equally as important, they know what not to include in a set of minutes. So there's a lot of things that are discussed at board meetings that do not belong in the minutes. And if they were in the minutes and there was an issue, it could mean huge repercussions for the board.
Yeah, Ben, I can chime in about the secretary role as well. As boards tend to shrink in size, if you think about, governance and associations, 20, 30 years ago, it was very common to have a board of, 25, 30 people. Today, boards are a lot smaller. So the secretary role is getting phased out in a lot of organizations because there is no, usually it's a function that's done by staff now. For those very, very small associations that rely on volunteers and don't have a lot of staff bandwidth, to Noah's point, there's someone who comes in who really doesn't have the training. When I read those minutes from clients that I work with, it's very evident that they're very long, they're almost verbatim minutes, and they don't include the key decision items that are made and the key, points that are made in a meeting, which are important to be captured. So I always encourage clients to seek out, if they don't have that internal resource, a staff person who is good at taking minutes and taking, good professional minutes. I always encourage going to a third party or an outside source to get that done. The other point that Noah made is completely valid, is that if you are a secretary, which is an officer position on a board, you will have a vote and you are extremely distracted by taking minutes. I've been on the board myself where I've had to do that. And it is very difficult to be engaged in the conversation and to, give your point of view when you're busy recording everything. So I completely encourage people to either find that internal resource or seek the expertise outside.
Thanks, Heather. One of the other questions I'd have for you as well is the unfortunate reality of governance meetings is sometimes they become contested. Sometimes results might come into question. So Get Quorum, for our part, we've had to turn over results for review. Have there been incidents of having to turn over minutes? Have you ever had a situation where minutes need to be referred to? And in your experience, where are minutes best stored from an official perspective for an association?
Ideally, they're stored on a portal. The originals usually are with a staff person. But in terms of, sorry, can you just reiterate, because you cut out a little bit with your question?
Yeah, my apologies. If you had instances, Get Quorum has had instances where we've been requisitioned for meeting documentation. Who was at the meeting, who voted, when, how long were they in attendance? I gather this is for meetings that have become contentious. And my question was, have you been in a situation, or are you aware of situations where meeting minutes need to be revisited and they need to be found? Where are they best stored? And have you had instances where the content of those need to be accurately reflect the meeting?
Yeah, the two places where I've seen minutes being requested are by auditor. So when you have a financial audit every year, it's very common for the auditors to ask for all of your board minutes. And then the second one is usually if there are any legal proceedings, they may ask for minutes to be provided as well. Those are really the only two areas. And in terms of storage, like I said, having a portal where that's housed is the ideal scenario. And then the admin person would have the original maybe in a secure place so that it couldn't be manipulated or changed. by anyone. So just a PDF of the minutes would be great to have in that portal for the board to access. And then the Word version would be probably in a secure spot with whoever is the one who is responsible for being the custodian for that document.
I think one of the themes we've seen is that the bylaws can vary to a great extent from association to association. Is there obligation ever to share minutes with the broader membership, or is it typically reserved only for boards, and then again only in the event that those minutes be reviewed officially for some purpose?
Typically, board minutes are confidential. For regulatory bodies, sometimes they have to make those minutes public, but generally they are private and confidential, and they're not shared with members. The minutes of member meetings are a different story. Those are obviously circulated to members before AGMs, and they vote on their approval as well. So those are for member meetings. It's different. For board, it's I'd say 99% of the time they're confidential and not accessible to anyone outside of the board.
Got it. Okay. All right. To be mindful of time, I promised you 25 minutes. We're running a little over time. So Mark, let's get on to the next slide so we can get our Q&A and have an enjoyable lunch hour. So I'm Ben from Get Quorum again, just before we get back into this. We have worked with associations ranging from voting membership in the dozens. We've worked with student associations with membership in the tens of thousands. We've worked with geographically distributed associations all around North America. And I can say with a great deal of confidence that adopting some form of electronic governance can only benefit an association. And so my focus for my part here is really on virtual meetings and electronic voting. A virtual meeting and electronic voting, they're related. They're siblings or cousins, whatever you might want to call them, but you have to understand them differently. So starting with electronic voting, and Mark, just hold on this slide for a second. I'll let you know when to go to the next. Starting with electronic voting, that is the ability to offer your membership the option to cast a ballot or a proxy online prior to the meeting. And I think one of the things, a common theme for the discussion here is that in the association space, bylaws may be very unique one to the next, and that can impact how you can, if and how you can offer electronic voting. And so, we'll circle back to that point again. Understand your bylaws, ensuring they're stored somewhere safely, but also making sure that you understand them as you are getting closer to your governance meeting is critically important. Things that might be there: are you offering a proxy? Are you offering a ballot? What are the differences in the uniqueness of your advanced voting? We've seen stuff, for example, like an association capped the number of proxies that an individual may hold. So if Noah, you can only give Noah 2 proxies, whereas, if it's unmentioned in your bylaws, then it is unlimited and an individual may hold any number of proxies. We've seen proxies require multiple signatories. We've seen them require witness signatures. We've seen proxies that are directed, meaning that the proxy holder is instructed specifically on the matters that they are to vote and on the candidates that they are to vote for, assuming that there is a board meeting, a board election. We've also seen purely undirected proxies, which means that the proxy holder may, at their discretion, vote in any way at the meeting. So understanding all of this, and the key to it really is your bylaws. So it's critically important that you have access to them and that you understand them. Moving on to a virtual meeting. Now think your town hall, your AGM, wherever you're getting a group of people together online. It may or may not include electronic voting. And some of the challenges that come along with electronic voting include things like tracking attendance. We've seen the requirement for membership to attend a meeting for a certain period of time. We've had to provide reports on, are they there at the beginning? Are they there at the end? Things that may be challenging are facilitating live voting. Can you handle nominations for? How would you integrate voting that happens prior to a meeting via a proxy or an advanced ballot together with your election results, or with your live voting? And can your elections be defended if things happen to become contentious? Those are some of the, challenges to be aware of. The obvious benefits to electronic voting, Mark, maybe we can move on to the next slide, these are the obvious benefits that and we have seen our clients benefit from when moving in the direction of virtual meetings and electronic voting. Is you will most definitely see a significant increase in participation. We see on average relative to paper-based proxies 2 to 3 times the amount of participation at your meetings. Improved accessibility. Well, a great example is we work with, they are a regulatory body for an Olympic sport across the globe. So they had 56 different chapters across time zones from Europe all the way to the West Coast, all attending and voting in one meeting. And I can only imagine how they would have done this live. So a virtual meeting, depending on the nature of your association, not only improve participation by allowing advanced proxy voting, but actually allow people from all over the world, multiple time zones, and distributed geography to attend the meeting, meaning improved accessibility. We consistently see shorter meeting times. We're able to administer voting periods quickly and efficiently, getting people in and out. Oftentimes, AGMs are rolled into and lumped into conferences, and conferences should be spent moving the business of your association forward, having meetings and socializing, not necessarily during voting periods. So shorter voting periods, virtual meetings allow great control over your audience. You may have a particularly verbose membership, a certain member that likes their voices to be heard, or you want to make sure that every member in every location can have their voice heard. A virtual meeting allows you to control all of that while improving efficiency and reducing costs. And of course, an electronic voting vendor can ensure that you're have improved transparency, and that in the nightmare scenario that your meeting has become contentious, the association board has a third party that can guarantee the results and the integrity of their election. So these are some of the benefits that you get when moving towards using electronic voting in virtual meetings. I'll just lastly say on the virtual meeting space that Heather is exactly right. During COVID, we saw a swing to virtual meetings. As soon as COVID was over, we saw a swing back to in-person. And now what we are seeing are virtual meetings that have hybrid components. And so there is a great deal of variance here too. We've seen a hybrid meeting. So again, that is a meeting with both a virtual and an in-person component. We've seen ones that are in-person led, meaning that the majority of your attendees are there in person with a small pool online. And conversely, we've seen the opposite, where there is a large group online and a smaller group in person. So software to help you track and manage, tie everything together is critical. And so we have seen these meetings, which even further offer more accessibility and participation, are becoming more and more popular. Great. So with that, we'd like to thank everyone. Mark, maybe we can move on to the last slide. The 4 presenters, there's myself, Noah, Heather, and Jeff. I want to thank you all for being here. And we will now move on to Q&A. So Q&A is down at the bottom of your screen, and I'm sure we're happy to hang around just as long as there are questions. So the first question that we answered was from Megan, and she was asking Jeff the name of the board management tool, and that was BoardSpace, boardspace.co.
Something I'll just chime in with. I think there's an interesting topic here that probably you could have an entire webinar about, which is the role or potential role of AI in the world of governance and impacts this may be having. I think you could easily see somebody showing up to a meeting with their AI note taker, joining along with them and taking notes. And I think it's just a whole interesting discussion to have around there, especially on that topic that came up earlier of there's probably some things being discussed that do not belong in the minutes, which an AI note taker may not understand or realize. So I think there's just a whole interesting discussion there around the use of AI and its role, just given the prevalence in AI note takers.
Yeah,
Noah, I knew you were going to have some thoughts. Please.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy you brought that up, Jeff. It's an interesting time now in let's call it meeting notes and minutes in AI. Unfortunately, there's some companies trying to figure it out. Us being one of them. but the level of accuracy with the AI is not 100%. I think the AI note takers are fantastic. I think it's really good if you want to take notes of a meeting, but notes of a meeting are a little bit different than minutes of a meeting. Minutes are a legally binding document. And unless that document is 100% or as close to 100% as possible, we're not at a level yet where we could trust the AI to actually figure it out front to end. So what we're developing at Minute Solutions is what we're calling AI augmented, where AI could help for sure, but we still have our staff of 150 working to actually do the majority of the heavy lifting, really, of the minute details that the AI can't figure out. But one side note, this is actually kind of interesting. Just anecdotally, I mean, I guess it's not anecdotally because we've been hearing it from a couple of people, more jokingly, I should say, rather than anecdotally. People see AI note takers, or even the one that we're in beta testing right now, join the meeting, and the common joke is, at what point are they going to have AI board members? So I think people are thirsty to actually have themselves replaced at a board meeting with an actual AI.
Thanks, Noah.
Exactly.
I'll just share a quick anecdotally. Get Quorum is constantly in the pursuit of optimizing internal processes, and so we look at AI frequently. And the conclusion we continually come back to is that there are small gains to be made by using it, but that the requirement for us to review AI produced solutions does not yet represent the amount of gains that you might think from an operational perspective. In other words, we haven't been able to cut out a person using AI, regardless of the process that we are trying to automate. There are lots of questions here. So unless anyone else on the panel wants to hop in on AI, don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole here, we're going to keep moving. All right, Temi asks, how does Wicket differ from an AMS or a membership management software? Jeff, that's obviously for you.
That's a great question. It's a fun question to answer. So you can think of Wicket really foundationally as membership management software. Like I'd say we fall into that class. We're definitely not association management software. So really what we do is we typically are helping organizations move away from traditional association management software. And so we provide those, what we think are the two foundational pieces really needed to do that, which is a really strong membership database that's built to integrate with other software tools, and a web and e-commerce platform that can handle things like membership dues and any other products or things that you're selling. So those two things deeply integrated together really help you to move away from traditional association management software. And that's really the work we do in the sector. Is you don't need the big AMS that's trying to do all these things for you. There's a much more nimble, flexible approach. So that's what we do.
Jeff, Tyler asks, this was probably for Heather, more best suited for Heather. What is the rationale for not providing board minutes to members? Our association posts all board minutes on our member site. I've never agreed with it. Curious to know your take.
Yeah, I would say a simple answer to that is that there is confidential information. There is information that's being discussed and recorded in the minutes that is for board only and not for broader consumption or exposure. There are some organizations, like I said, the regulatory bodies are ones that they have to provide the minutes to all stakeholders. They have to post it on their website. There's some associations whose culture is to also disclose those minutes. It's not very common, but it does happen. I would say in that situation, just make sure that it is on side with your legal counsel. So legal counsel has said that that's okay for you to do. And also your directors and officers insurance. You might want to check that as well to make sure that there is nothing in there that says that you need to keep those minutes confidential. Those would be the only two cautions I would say. But ultimately, it's up to your board to decide, are they private or are they public? And as long as those that your legal counsel and your D&O insurance are okay with that, then I would say whatever culturally is more acceptable and according to your board, then that's where a lot of organizations go.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Two questions here that are very similar from the Puni. How common or uncommon are hybrid AGMs, which offer both virtual and in-person attendance? And then from an anonymous attendee is we're thinking of whole AGM, have concerns how we're going to handle it, attendance, how to approach it. So I'll take a swing at both of these. So we would say that the hybrid meetings are growing in commonality. I wouldn't say that it is more or less common than a purely in-person or a purely virtual meeting. From a challenges perspective, Get Quorum's platform makes the voting and all that stuff easy. That should be the actual number one, if we're being perfectly honest, the number one challenge for hybrid meetings isn't what Get Quorum handles, actually, although we make it much easier. It's actually the audio visual. And so the act of tying together your in-person audience with your virtual audience so they can all hear each other at a level of quality such to facilitate a governance meeting, that is your biggest challenge. So finding a vendor that can support the nature and the size of your meeting and the venue, that is the number one thing that we look to ensure that our clients have satisfied. So if you're an association and you come to us and say, hey, we got 100 voters, we're going to do a hybrid AGM, we will ask you a series of questions about how it is that you're going to pull that off. And then once you've assured us, then we can ensure that your voting goes smoothly from our perspective. We've also had student unions with just under 20,000 voters, and so their hybrid meeting looks like a web stream. So the short answer is audio visual is your first concern. Voting, attendance tracking, all that stuff. Get Quorum can handle. That's a slam dunk. But your starting point is always going to be on the hybrid side. How do I handle that? Get Quorum has a vendor. When an association calls us and says, I've got an association under, I think it's a couple hundred voters, we direct them to a vendor called MCR. They are an industry leading AV firm, and there are lots of others that can support you. You can spend $1,000, you can spend $20,000. There's a big variety there. Okay, a couple more questions. Kelly Jacobson. Does AGM electronic voting need to be live, done during a short window, or can it be done in advance of a meeting? It's very stressful managing the Zoom and live voting concurrently. In brackets, I'm a staff member here. So, Kelly, Get Quorum software offers advanced balloting or proxies and live voting. It integrates together smoothly. Most of our association customers ask us to provide what we call a moderator. So Get Quorum attends most of our meetings with an individual. That individual facilitates the voting over Zoom. So the stressed out staff member from the association has nothing to worry about if you're working with us. But I think the answer to your question always is going to lie in your bylaws. And that is the number one thing challenge that Get Quorum has, if we're transparent, in speaking when speaking with associations, is that the needs from one to the other on voting, whether or not you're accepting nominations from the floor, are there speeches? Is it I don't know why I'm forgetting the word, a slate? Are you voting on a slate of candidates? It's the bylaws are your key, and understanding what you can and you cannot do really starts with your association bylaws. From there, once you understand, it's much easier to find out and figure out what sort of vendors you need to put together an electronic AGM. Let's go to Meredith. This is a tough one. Jeff, I'm wondering, are there any emerging concerns you are aware of in terms of association data in the cloud crossing the US border? Wondering about erosion of privacy laws or the potential for smaller orgs to have to think more like Canadian banks, who last I checked do not have any data going back and forth across the border. It's a long question, but is this on your radar, Jeff? Talk to us about the privacy of membership data.
Geez, that's a great question, Meredith. So I think the simple answer is yes, this is on our radar when we talk to Canadian organizations. This is naturally, given the current political climate, becoming more top of mind. I do think what we are seeing is a lot of organizations asking the question, are there Canadian vendors I can work with? And that's for a variety of reasons, data privacy or security only being one of them. I do think that there's a broad challenge here, just in general, right? Like, I think there's the idea of where you're storing your core data, that system of record, like a Wicket, we can house data in Canada or in the US. So that's a benefit we have for Canadian customers. However, one of the biggest challenges, so many other software tools we use on an everyday basis are US based. Maybe you're using MailChimp or Eventbrite. Like, so many of these tools that are super accessible are US based. So I think there's just a general challenge there. And I think it's really important to think about, as you look at what tools you're using, only giving that tool the data it needs to do its job. So there's a lot more, thinking about that. What do I need to give a tool like MailChimp to do its job effectively? Do I have to give it everything, or maybe I'm just giving it a subset of data, for example? So that's a great webinar topic, Meredith. Let's do a webinar on that.
I was just going to say, Jeff,
Yeah,
it definitely wouldn't be me. It would be my partner, Trevor, who handles all of our privacy and compliance issues. But Meredith says, thanks for tackling it. I'm sure there's more to talk about in months to come. What I would just put out there is, rather than focusing on whether the data resides in Canada or Mexico or some tiny little island off the coast of North America, which I'm sure some people do as well, focusing on the data standards that the databases use to keep your data secure as an association might be a good starting point, rather than focusing on in what country is your data being held. But before I get in too much trouble with my partner for commenting on issues that I like privacy that I am not an expert on, we'll move on. Sarah asks, how many years back would you go when posting minutes publicly on a member site? We went 2 years back. Is there an industry standard? Heather, I would imagine that would be.
So it's, as I said before, it's more uncommon to post your board minutes than common. So I don't know of any industry standard. And I said, to go back to that culture thing, it's really up to what your organization is most comfortable with. So I would say 2 years is probably enough, but if there's no harm in adding more. So I think it's really up to each organization to determine how far back to go.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Lastly here, Donna makes a comment. Hybrid meetings are more challenging to execute. You're essentially running 2 meetings. Donna, I would not argue with you one bit. You pick some good vendors though on the AV side, and it shouldn't be too stressful at all. And with that, all of our questions are done. Noah, Heather, Jeff, thank you so much for being here. And everybody that's still here, we're going to be in short order. We will email you the link to the recording of this presentation. It'll get posted on our blog. And likewise, from Pinpoint, Wicket, and Minute Solutions, you'll potentially see it there as well. So thank you all for attending. And a couple comments. Great webinar. Thanks. And Donna says, I used that MCR last year and it was great. Thanks, Donna. I really appreciate you coming. Same with you, Megan. Appreciate the questions. Everybody else, thank you for being here.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
All right.